Welcome to the Untold Tales audio anthologies. Written by Dr. Jeffrey A. Robinson and narrated by Melissa Del Toro Schaffner. The Traveling Salesman, Part 6. Glactyl and I are traveling salesmen. I'm originally from Earth, Glactyl is not. He is a reptilian humanoid from a galaxy-spanning civilization that is so advanced that they consider Earth to be a primitive, rustic world of ignorant country bumpkins. Originally, he was the master trader, and I worked for him, but he experienced an unfortunate series of setbacks and things changed. He lost his salesman's license, and now I'm the one registered with the Galaxian Trade Guild, and he works for me. But things haven't gone too smoothly with me being in charge either. In fact, I was the one currently experiencing a major setback. We thought we had a chance to turn things around after we discovered a rich deposit of magnetic monopoles on a tiny planet called Algar. They were concentrated in a piece of nova core that had crashed into the planet millions of years ago. After some trading and bartering, we had managed to get the local population of Algar 3 to mine the monopole metal for us, and we had even managed to sell the first batch of core at a very nice profit. But problems developed. After we returned to Algar to mine more of the precious metal from the remaining deposits there, we found that privateers had followed us and were now planning on taking over our claim and robbing us blind. At this point, neither Glactyl nor I knew whether or not we'd be able to escape with our cargo, our ship, or even our lives. All we had was my salesman license, a beat-up spaceship, Glactyl's wonderfully useful unitool, the high-tech equivalent of a Swiss Army knife, and a single matter duplicator that we used to make items that we sold to members of primitive cultures that we visited. Before we could load up another load of cargo to sell, 2 large converted warships appeared over our mining operation and started making demands. They demanded that we tell them what we were up to, and we did the only thing we could think of. We lied. Fortunately, we had installed electronic dampers around our mine to reduce the emissions from the monopoles, which would otherwise disrupt the electronics on our ship. They would not completely hide their presence, but they would mask the quantity of the ore deposits that remained and make it difficult to pinpoint their exact location. We explained that we had found a tiny deposit of monopoles, but that the mine we were operating had been almost completely tapped out. However, that was a big lie, since we'd probably been sitting on the largest concentration of magnetic monopoles to be found anywhere within the nearest dozen solar systems. We also told them that, while the location had been cleaned, there were several other rich deposits that we hadn't reached yet, and that they should check those out themselves. Which was another lie. Anyway, since we were seriously outnumbered and outgunned, we couldn't hide, fight, or flee. So, we decided to stall. They instructed us to stay put while they decided to check out our stories and conduct their own survey of the planet. We had bought ourselves a little time, but we had to figure out something fast, or we'd be in more trouble than we already were. "You're sure that they're privateers and not pirates?" I asked again. "Yes," replied Glactyl. "Pirates would have simply killed us outright and stolen our cargo and ship. Technically, privateers are licensed traders, but they're a corrupt bunch that hide the true nature of their activities. They will try to at least maintain the pretense of being legitimate, but they'll likely make us an offer that we will not be able to refuse. And they'll likely leave us with nothing except our ship. However, when they find out that we lied to them, we may not get off that easy." "So what can we do?" I asked. "I don't know," said Glactyl. "I don't have any ideas. Do you?" After thinking for a moment, I replied, "Actually, I do." "Really? Do you have a plan? What do you have in mind?" I laughed and said, "Why, we'll just use what all good con men always have. Misdirection, sleight of hand, and trickery." "What?" "Never mind. First, I need to ask you some questions. Can you quickly tell me what valuable things can and cannot be fabricated using the matter duplicators? Let's see, he said. We can't make long-chain organic molecules. It has to do with how proteins get folded. That's why you can't copy people or higher animals. The resultant copies aren't quite right at the molecular level, and they die quickly. You also can't make things like negentropic infusions that we harvested on Earth. Then there are things like exotic matter that you cannot fabricate. That's stuff like antimatter, dark matter, and magnetic monopoles. Also, there is a long list of unstable substances and elements, like radioactive isotopes, as well as metastable compounds like energy cells or nuclear explosives. In fact, the most valuable items in the galaxy are generally those that cannot be made from a matter duplicator. That makes sense, I said. After you left Earth, I played with the single matter duplicator that was left behind in the confusion after the Glactyls took you away and stepped in to help reorganize things after the zombie apocalypse that you triggered that almost destroyed the world. Anyway, I tried making a lot of things and found that I was wrong about how the matter duplicator worked. I had originally thought that you had to provide the right elements in the correct concentrations, and that the matter duplicator simply rearranged them into different objects. I found out that any matter that is input is simply converted into energy and reconstituted into the matter of the correct elements. Well, the matter isn't really converted into energy, explained Glactyl. Incoming matter is converted to a substance called protomatter. It's something somewhere between energy and matter, but really isn't either. It is a variation of a phase of matter you humans call Bose-Einstein condensate, which can only be created near absolute zero, right? Well, that's one way to make protomatter, but there are other ways too. Yeah, I sort of figured that out. You see, when I was playing with the matter duplicator, I interrupted the machine once while I was conjuring me up some lunch. I opened it up and saw what I think must have been protomatter inside. Oh dear, said Glactyl. I hope you didn't tamper with it. Protomatter is terribly unstable. With proper processing, it can spontaneously coalesce into any type of matter or energy, with disastrous results. Like what? Well, without specific controls, the protomatter can randomly condensate into random atoms of any element. The result is usually a very energetic chemical reaction that is completely unpredictable. The result is usually explosive. Imagine what would happen if you randomly mixed together all the compounds that you could find in a chemistry store. The results would likely be fatal. Well, then it's good that I didn't mess with it. I simply closed it back up and let it resume making my lunch. I was, however, really fascinated with that protomatter. It looked really weird, like translucent silver jello. It wasn't quite solid, but it wasn't quite a liquid either. Anyway, this answers a lot. I figure that if we're going to trick the privateers, we need to think of something we could be marketing, selling, or buying that can't be manufactured by a matter duplicator. Please go on, said Glactyl. Well, tell me about the teleporter. What would prevent us from, say, teleporting antimatter directly into the enemy vessel? Well, said Glactyl, there are several things. Just as there are some things that cannot be fabricated, there are some things that cannot be teleported. Antimatter is one, protomatter is another. You also can't teleport things with high energy densities, like power cells or nuclear weapons. Also, the ship has shields in place, so you could not attack it with any weapons we possess, and you couldn't teleport anything to the other side of those defensive screens. Why? What did you have in mind? I'm not sure, I said, thinking some more. But first, we need to create some sort of distraction. Within a couple of days, the 2 privateer ships had returned. They called us on a common communication frequency and started asking us more detailed questions. They were not pleased. They challenged us harshly. We checked, and we haven't been able to locate any other deposits of monopoles on this planet except for where your ship is currently parked. Tell me, if the mine here is empty, what are you still doing here? Oh, I explained. We used the locals as miners for a while, but the mine is tapped out. We've got some in our cargo bay, but we hung around because we're planning to set up fields to plant gruba vines. As you know, their roots are rich in long-chain organics that are used in longevity treatments for the ultra-rich. They can also be used to treat a variety of maladies. Since the chemicals can't be synthesized using matter duplicators, we thought we might grow them here. That can't be worth much, said the privateer commander. It takes too long to grow them. Yeah, we know. We were planning to set up farming operations here and come back every few years to load their harvests for sale. But gruba plants rot too quickly. How would you do that? We were going to store each season's crop in large stasis chamber warehouses. We didn't see any farms with those plants. I think you're lying to us. No, really. We just finished negotiations with the locals and haven't started planting yet. The ultra-rich ship went silent for a short while, apparently as they were considering our most recent story. I don't think they believe us, whispered Glactyl. They don't need to, I replied. We just need to stall for a while so I can set things up. What things? Just wait. After a long pause, the privateers called back. We've decided to look around and check out what you've said. In the meantime, stay where you are. Do not attempt to leave, or you and your ship will be destroyed. Then one of the ships left, but the second remained, hovering overhead to watch us. So, what do you plan now, Bob Clayton? Said Glactyl condescendingly. It will not take them long to discover that we have deceived them again. Well, don't worry. I have some ideas. Here, take this. What is it? It's a high-density data stick that I synthesized from the matter duplicator. Before I left Earth, I loaded it with the entire digital archives of the Library of Congress. What's that? It's the contents of everything ever written. It even includes every motion picture and audio recording ever made. It even contains the entire database of the U.S. Patent Office. But how will that help us? Human technology is so inferior to anything we could make ourselves. Well, I said, I figure if we can't outfight these guys, we'll just have to outsmart them. And if we can't defeat them because they are so high-tech, then we'll just have to take these guys out with low-tech smoke and mirrors. What? That makes no sense, stammered Glactyl. Actually, it does. You just don't understand because you've never watched The Wizard of Oz. Several days later, both ships once again hovered over our own. We had barely had time to make preparations for the return of the privateers. We had spent most of our time planning a few surprises for them, one of which included drilling our 2-mile mine shaft far deeper than it had been before. You have lied to us, said the enemy commander menacingly. We have completed a thorough analysis of this planet, and we have decided that the ecosystem on this planet is not suitable for growing gruba roots. All right, I explained. You've caught us. We weren't telling you the truth. We think your ship is sitting on a large concentration of monometal, said the enemy leader. Yeah, that's what we thought too. Unfortunately, the field only consisted of microscopic pieces, and the concentration of monopoles that you are detecting are merely residual amounts that aren't even worth trying to mine. Then tell me why you're really here, demanded the leader. Okay, we didn't want you to find out, because what we've found is many times more important than monopoles. What would that be? Well, we think we found the archaeological remains of an ancient Zill city. Do you know that really advanced race of godlike aliens that controlled the galaxy millions of years ago? The Zill are a myth, countered the privateer. They are stories that are just told to scare children. Really? I heard that a rogue trader near one of the core worlds found a stash of Zill weapons that he sold at auction for 1 billion credits. The leader scoffed. Most people don't believe there were ever any real Zil weapons, but that they belonged to some other ancient race. Well, then that's what we've probably found. And you're right, we have been stalling. While you were gone, we've been working to unlock a vault deep below the surface. I think you're lying to us again. Okay, then just send some of your people down and we'll show you. After a few minutes of discussing their options, the privateers agreed, and just moments later, a team of heavily armed soldiers teleported to the bridge of our ship. The leader was a huge, mean-looking alien with a cruel-looking scar across his face. Glaring down at Bob, he snarled,
"I am Commander Hokkaido. I am the leader of this Paraxian expeditionary force."
"Greetings," I replied, trying desperately to look calm and pleasant. "I am Master Trader Bob Clayton, but I've already sent you my bona fides. Please follow me." I escorted the entourage to the elevator that led to the mine far below. They all climbed into a large metal cage suspended by a thick metal cable.
"Why are you using this primitive conveyance?"
"Oh, we needed something simple. While we were mining the few monopoles that we were able to harvest, we found that sophisticated electronics malfunctioned." Hokkaido performed a communications check to confirm that he could still contact his ship. Then, everyone descended down the shaft that he and Glactyl had drilled nearly a year before. However, the mine was deep, and their trip seemed to take an inordinate amount of time.
"How deep is this shaft?"
asked the leader. "Nearly 2 miles, I said. "That's about 7,000 lartens by your units of measure. It's what we found far below the monopole deposits that we need to show you. We think they're ruins from more than 500 million years ago. From our analysis, we think we've discovered a long-lost Zil weapons vault." There was, of course, no secret weapons vault, though I had discovered some odd items while blasting the borehole to make a special new room just for this visit. While blasting out the vertical tunnel, I had uncovered several strange metal boxes that had proven impervious to the drilling beam. There were no associated ruins or evidence of why they would be buried here. I assumed they were stasis boxes of some kind, but they did not seem important at the time, except as curiosities. Indeed, I hadn't even told Glactyl about them yet, since he was so busy and so worried about my plans. As the elevator approached our destination, I continued the story Glactyl and I had prepared.
500 million years? Nothing could survive that long."
That's what we thought too. That's why you have to see it for yourself. In any case, we found metal that's nearly as dense as neutronium, and we haven't been able to penetrate it. We haven't even been able to scratch the surface. We were just going to try using a tiny anti-proton particle beam to see if we could open it before you returned, but we can't even carve off a piece of the metal on the vault door. In any case, I continued quickly, your timing is perfect. This will be our last test. If it fails, we don't have anything more than we can think of to breach the vault, and you're welcome to try.
"I still don't believe you,"
said the leader.
"If you're lying to us, you will be slain. However, for the time being, we will let you live. Proceed."
Our descent continued. I don't know if it was fear of the hot, dry air deep in the shaft, but my mouth grew dry, and I found it hard to swallow. By that time, the opening to the shaft was so far above us that it looked like a single star in an endless black sky. We passed the opening of the main mine, and the commander barked.
"What is that?"
"Oh, that's the empty mine where we found a few monopoles, but they're all gone now. We can stop and look at the played-out mine on the way back up if you wish. However, we're descending further to where we found the Zil weapons vault." The commander grunted, not completely accepting my account. The descent continued. After a few more long minutes, the elevator finally stopped, and the door to the wired cage opened, revealing a long horizontal tunnel that led deeper into the rock. After about 50 yards, the tunnel stopped and opened up into a large empty cavern. The place smelled dirty and dusty because Glactyl and I only carved out this hole a few hours earlier. The room was dimly lit, and at the far end, there was a massive wall of metal. Ricardo started to advance, but I stopped him. Wait, we were just going to try an antimatter beam on the metal. It would be best to watch from back here. Unbeknownst to the commander, there was nothing there to examine. The entire cavern consisted of an empty cavity that we had recently hollowed out, which had a smooth white wall on the far side. What they were watching was merely a holographic image by Glactyl's all-purpose unitool, though we had also fabricated a few other props with our matter duplicator. The projection played a film I put together from old movies and film clips. With Glactyl's help, we had even overlaid the image sequence with newly dubbed audio. Since we were so close to the monopole deposits overhead, nothing electronic in nature would function. The most advanced tech in the cavern was an incandescent bulb in the projector. Everything else was purely mechanical. Even the audio was generated from crude celluloid platens, called records. The commander tried to reach his ship with his communicator, but his comm check failed. I explained. We think this Zil metal disables all electronics, but just wait for a moment. We're ready to begin. They watched the activity on the other side of the large cavern as the images of two technicians appeared to activate a small particle beam weapon that was aimed at the massive metal door in front of them. There was a bright flash of light as the antimatter beam seemed to strike the metal wall, but at first, nothing seemed to happen. The wall was totally immune to the onslaught of the antimatter beam. I smiled to myself. There were, in fact, no technicians or anti-proton cannon. This was all just part of the show. Suddenly, there was a massive explosion that knocked everyone back. I righted myself up and worried that the explosive charges that I planted earlier were too large, but everyone climbed to their feet, and I was relieved to see that no one was seriously hurt. I needed them alive to watch the rest of my movie. As the smoke and dust dissipated, they could all see that the wall beyond was gone. It appeared that the metal wall had been destroyed and blasted away, only to reveal a huge cavern beyond. In the distance, they could see a city, a gigantic subterranean metropolis with spires of buildings that rose from the darkness far below, and other spires that hung like stalactites from the ceiling above. Tiny points of light traveled between the black towers like airborne vessels of some sort of huge winged creatures fluttered in the air. The scale was immense, and the city seemed to extend for miles. However, before anyone could approach the opening to see more, a rumbling arose. Then a deep voice roared.
"What has happened here?"
The voice shouted.
"What have you done? Who dares awaken mighty Zil? Come forward and face our wrath."
Then a large black form rose from below and partially blocked the view of the city. Something slowly climbed to the opening to peek into the hole that had been blasted through the wall.
"I am the mighty Cthulhu,"
shouted the voice.
"Who are these insignificant insects that have dared disturb my slumber?"
A giant head appeared, a squid-like face with a massive tentacles below a slimy black face with too many eyes. The tentacles reached into the room and grabbed the two technicians who had remained near the wall. The black tentacles, which were thicker than a full-grown man's body, took the hapless workers and tore them in two as easily as tissue paper. Throwing the pieces aside, the eyes of the giant creature focused on the remaining occupants of the room, and the tentacles reached for us. Glactyl and I screamed, "Hurry! We have to leave! Run for your lives!" We raced toward the wire-caged elevator, but the commander and his soldiers were already in front of us. Behind us, the sound of roaring and the screams of men dying hideously chased us down the hallway. Of course, the sounds were merely audio from the movie. No one died. As we arrived, one of the soldiers was desperately trying to activate the elevator controls. Everyone hurried to get on, and only after the elevator door closed did we begin our slow ascent. Far below, smoke billowed out of the opening that all of us had so recently fled, and a deep voice bellowed.
"Come, my brethren, see what I have found! Hurry, awaken, come and feed before they get away!"
Everyone was screaming at this point. The commander was vainly attempting to reach his ship. Some of the soldiers fired their weapons blindly down into the shaft below, but as we slowly rose, all we could hear below us was distant rumbling and shouting and the deep distant echoes of dire rhythmic music. Finally, we reached the surface where standard electronics worked once more. The commander called for him and his team to be teleported to their ship immediately and advised both of his ships to go on full battle alert status. Glactyl and I hurried into our ship and listened on our headsets as we monitored the communications between the two ships.
What's going on?
Called one ship to the other. We don't know. The commander says we're under attack, but he hasn't said anything specific. Someone is screaming about the Zill.
The what? You're kidding me, aren't you?
No, I think they're serious.
Do we have any orders yet?
No. The commander says to watch the surface for any sign of attack. I checked my chronometer and looked up at the two ships overhead. Neither of them had moved, for which I was extremely grateful, but I squinted as I searched the sky. The ships needed to remain in place for the final act of my performance to succeed. I scanned the sky looking for evidence of the tiny drones that Glactyl and I had launched just before the commander had arrived. Finally, I spied the drones high over the alien ships. I watched as they released their packages on tiny parachutes that slowly descended toward the two warships. Once again, I was depending on low-tech gimmickry to defeat high-tech weapons and defenses. As they reached the altitude of the enemy vessels, the shielded boxes that the parachutes carried opened, exposing the magnetic monopoles inside. Their proximity to the ships disrupted the enemy's shields, and both ships wobbled and staggered, as if they were struggling to remain in the air.
What's happening?
Called one of the ships. I don't know. All systems are failing. Weapons and shields are offline. We're redirecting all power to the ship's anti-gravity generators so we don't fall out of the sky. What could have done this? Shouted someone. I didn't register any energy discharge. I don't think anyone fired on us.
I can't tell,
called the other ship.
My sensors just went offline.
Do we have any orders yet?
No, I think everyone's still trying to figure out what's going on. Wait, what's that?
Where?
There, on the ground.
I grinned at Glactyl as the holographic projectors that we had set up earlier finally started the last part of our special entertainment. Oh, how I wished I could have watched the show from high overhead. The holographic projectors displayed an image of a large spherical vessel slowly rising from the ground. The projection showed the ground being ripped open and chunks of rock the size of houses being tossed like gravel. The gigantic spherical structure, easily 10 or 20 times the size of the Paraxian warships, slowly rose through the planetary surface, as if the rock were made of smoke. Actually, that was true, since the projections were completely insubstantial holograms. A few weapons aboard the privateer ships managed to fire, but the energy beams passed harmlessly through the images of the giant ship that rose beneath them. I checked my watch again, praying that this one last piece of our plan worked properly. Even Glactyl had said that its success was uncertain. The last drone finally reached the first Paraxian vessel. With the ship's shields offline, it was able to physically touch the hull. When it made contact, it detonated its contents, a 10-pound mass of protomatter from the matter duplicator. We hadn't been sure that it would work, but it performed just as we'd hoped. The protomatter destabilized and converted to energy. It was as if 10 pounds of antimatter had detonated right next to the ship. The blast sundered the vessel, and pieces of the ship scattered and flew through the air. It was more than a minute before flaming bits of debris began to reach the ground, and for a while, a fiery rain fell across an area several miles across. The other ship was gone as well. But it hadn't been destroyed. It had fled the chaos and hurled itself out into space. I was quite pleased. The show was over, and the audience had obviously been impressed. We monitored the last ship as it left the system. It was frantically sending out alerts and warnings on all frequencies. If Glactyl was correct, they wouldn't return with anything less than a fleet of warships. I figured that there was a chance that no one would even take the commander seriously. My guess was that his superiors would conclude that the commander had made up some insane story to cover up the fact that he had lost one of his 2 ships. But even if he did finally convince them that the Zil really did exist, it would take some time to assemble a large military task force for them to return. And by that time, Glactyl and I would have long since finished our mining operations and left. As we wrapped up our activities, I found that I felt sorry for the Algar. They were going to become the center of some seriously unwanted attention for quite a while, and their planet would become famous, as relic hunters and treasure seekers flocked here to search for the long-lost Zil treasure. Still, despite the setbacks and problems, it had been a profitable trip. We could now pay off what we were owed on the ship and purchase some badly needed upgrades. Overall, it was a successful business trip. The Traveling Salesman continues in Part 7 when Bob and Glactyl regroup and find new markets out on the rim. Did you know Anchor FM is now Spotify for podcasters? You may notice it's becoming easier and easier to interact with us and support the show. We love our listeners, fans, and patrons, like Mystic Buddha, who gave us a 5-star review on Apple iTunes. It reads, "The stories are so thought-provoking. The narrator has a soothing and fun voice. These are great for the ride home." That's exactly why we created the Untold Tales podcast, Mystic Buddha, for listeners like you. We really appreciate your 5-star review. Thank you. If you agree with Mystic Buddha, please share this podcast with your friends and family and anybody who might be a sci-fi buff. We know they'll love it. And if you'd like to support the show for about 1 cup of coffee a month, you can go to the link on the bottom of the show notes in every episode and find a Support This Podcast link. We value bringing original, high-quality short stories to you every month, and we appreciate your support to keep this podcast ad-free. Thank you so much and have a great day.